Hello, I'm Jorian Murray, and welcome to Good Things Happen, the show that invites changemakers and enablers to share their inspiring stories of progress. Whilst change can be uncomfortable, unexpected, and at times disruptive, it's inevitable, and more often than not, change is for good. We'll be hearing from people from all walks of life who have been at the forefront of change, including their journeys to get there and their motivations. Because when people work together for a common cause, good things happen.
They're trying to go to the lunar South Pole where there could be water, where we know there's water. We might be able to mine it and turn it into fuel that could take us onto Mars.
By virtue of having spacecraft observing what's going on back here on Earth, we'll garner more knowledge. And with that, we'll hopefully, come lots of good decisions about how we go forward in humanity and take care of our planet.
At NASA, we say, why don't dinosaurs exist anymore? Well, they didn't have a space program.
We are living in a new space age. The first, which began in 1957 with the launch of Sputnik 1, was characterized as a Cold War space race between Soviet Russia and the USA. The current space renaissance is promising to deliver extraordinary technological, commercial, and potentially environmental benefit as space travel is democratized. It could also present significant danger. To help us understand what's currently happening in the interplanetary world, I'm joined by two space experts, former NASA number 2 and an advisor to 3 presidential candidates. Lori Garver is author of Escaping Gravity, a personal account of her time initiating this new space age. When reviewing the book, an astrophysicist from the American Museum of Natural History encouraged readers to bring popcorn as you bear witness to an untold slice of space history. Also joining us is Citi's resident aerospace expert and equity research analyst, Jason Gursky. Lori, Jason, welcome to Good Things Happen. We are delighted to have you on the show. As ever, I like to begin by delving into our guests' past. Lori, was space something that captured your attention from a young age?
Well, thank you, Jordan. It's nice to be with you. Space probably came to me later than most. As a girl growing up in Michigan in the 1960s, there weren't a lot of people who looked like me involved in the space program, but I did, after college, start working for then Senator John Glenn, who had been the first American to orbit the Earth, but I was working on his political campaign. I had by then moved to Washington, D.C., majored in political science and economics, and while he was not successful, even in the primary presidential election, he and his team helped look out for the early career campaign workers, and I got a job starting at the National Space Institute, a place that was a nonprofit looking to provide advocacy and support for the civil U.S. space program. So I ended up staying with that organization for 13 years, got a master's in science, technology, and public policy with a focus on space policy, and then went to NASA in the 1990s and worked in aerospace industry, then going back to lead the transition team for NASA in the incoming Obama administration. And that's when I became deputy administrator.
Amazing. Jason, where did you start out on your journey to what you now do?
Very long and circuitous route, that's for sure. I certainly remember, those initial shuttle days and having one of my high school physics teacher, I think at the time perhaps, had put his name in the hat to be one of those civilians that went up. And I think we had a teacher that actually went up on one of those field missions, if my memory serves me correctly. I could be wrong. Now my memory seems to fade after 7 years. So certainly a lot of awareness then, and then took a big pause, went off to, both undergraduate and graduates focused on geopolitics and thought I'd help solve the Cold War at that time. and came back to all things geopolitics by way of my equity research role. Stepped away for roughly 5 years to work in the space industry and working for a company that builds spacecraft and operates a constellation of Earth intelligence satellites. So we can talk about that technology as we go into this. And then made my way back to Citigroup and equity research because I love the intellectual stimulation of the markets and writing about the industry. And so I've had an opportunity to be both a part of it and be somebody that sits out on the outside of it and gets the opportunity to kind of opine on what's going on, which is fun.
It's amazing. To put myself in the mood, I've been listening to the soundtrack to 2000 Space, the Space Odyssey. Laurie, how would you characterize the current explosion of interest and investment in space? Is a new space age, is that a term that you would use?
I have used the term a new space age. It's in the subtitle of my book. I think there are a number of things, just like any area of investment, that needed to come together to fuel this. And in our case, in the space world, it was a combination of the technology, national policy, and access to money. And I would say in a lot of fields, markets. So for me, when I was in NASA in the 1990s, the administrator of NASA really felt the timing was right then. And we were pushing technologies that we thought could lead to reusable space transportation. And that's really the key. Once you leave Earth's gravity well, you are halfway to anywhere. I believe it was a science fiction author who coined that phrase. But getting out of the Earth's gravity well is challenging. So reusable rockets have been the goal for decades. And really, I think the reason we're having this renaissance, as you called it, now for space is the lowering of the cost of space transportation. And NASA set that in motion when I came back at a time when, this is now 2008, 2009, we had not only technological advancements since the 1990s, but we had a number of wealthy individuals who were willing to invest. So we set policies that allowed NASA to be a customer instead of just what we called cost plus accounting. It's just an acquisition method. And we were counting on the private sector putting some skin in the game. And that's what they did. And so far, the cost of getting into space, the regularity of it, the reliability is what has really underpinned, I think, the growth. Now, at least in the US, that growth peaked a few years ago and is maybe starting to build back up. And that's, again, it's a combination of things that are required. And, the access to capital, when it was reduced, I think a lot of people felt space investments were sometimes not as ripe as they needed to be when they were going into at least be traded in the public markets through our special acquisition, the SPAC that we have here in the US. But this is really something that I believe is still just at the beginning. I view space as just another domain. We had the previous one being air, and before that, being able to cross the oceans.
Jason, this lowering of the cost is bringing in many more players. Give us a shape to this new era, if you will.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think to Laurie's point, the lowering of cost of access to space has been the key here. And there are dozens, if not multiple dozens of companies in the launch industry. There's obviously been one that does the vast majority of all launches that get done across the globe, particularly here in the United States. So that in of itself is a bit of an ecosystem, right? People chasing the launch market and trying to find out new and clever ways to lower the cost and coming at it in different ways, from large rockets doing ride shares and putting up multiple spacecraft at a time, to smaller launch vehicles that want to insert spacecraft in the as close as they can to the intended orbital slot for the spacecraft themselves. But what that has enabled, I'll start maybe on the military side of things, is to Lori's point, a new domain in warfare. First it was land and air, and now we've got space. And the utilization of space, it's really the ultimate high ground. It allows countries like the United States and our allies, and I said certainly our near peers as well, to launch spacecraft to be able to understand what's going on down on Earth, almost in real time, and almost every inch of the Earth, on a 24/7 basis. At least that's the goal. We're not quite there yet, but that's where we're heading. And it's the idea here is to have eyes on what your potential enemies are up to. So that certainly has incented a lot of investment, and a lot of the money that's flown through these SPACs have gone into these kinds of technologies, Earth observation and launch in particular. And now, as we've got this vision of larger spacecraft being able to go further, we've got people that are standing up business cases to do lots of different things, from putting up space stations for zero gravity R&D labs to potentially going out and mining asteroids, to companies that are even being set up to further transport spacecraft into their eventual orbital slot after they leave a launch vehicle. So it's kind of like transportation within transportation. So the ecosystem has gotten very robust, but all of it has been catalyzed by the lowering of cost of access to space, which has been, I think, the key unlock, and I think a part of what Lori has some experience in helping bring about, which is great.
Lori, give us some insight. You talk about reusability. We talk about public-private partnership. It's easy with hindsight just to talk about those things very simply, but I know from your book it's quite challenging. Not everybody was kind of aligned in following the same kind of policies. To give us some insight into how that evolved, please.
Sure. I think it actually was helpful that, as with your first question, you asked how I got involved. I didn't get involved in the traditional sense and get tied up with a certain way of doing things. And when you open your aperture, you can really see, well, this just makes sense. But those people who were launching things to space and able to charge hundreds of millions of dollars, it didn't make a lot of sense for them to open this up to new entrants and for the government to stop just paying them whatever they wanted to charge. So, of course, it wasn't super popular. And yet, when you're a government employee, I felt, at least, that my role was to represent what was best for the nation. And it was so clear that this was holding the U.S. back. We had lost the launch business. It really always has been a business for 50 years. Aerospace companies have been building these rockets and launching them and charging the government. So we were able to go from what had been a lucrative business for the U.S. to losing all of that to the Russians, the Chinese, and the French, to winning that back. And I think last year there were 50 some launches. We had one or two commercial launches in around the year 2000. So it just made a lot of sense. And it obviously was going to be something that you had to overcome the status quo in order to accomplish. Now, the way we work here, the contractors work very closely with their representatives on the Hill. And while we in the administration proposed this new way of doing business, Congress had different ideas, and that was ultimately a compromise that allowed us to get our foot in the door. And I think everybody's on board now. But change is hard. And the very real reason is that the incentives are aligned for those who already have the business to keep it. So you all know, this is about risk, and it was risky. And indeed, we only have SpaceX successfully doing this today, hopefully that will not be the case much longer. We in the US have Boeing as a competitor coming up here in a couple of weeks to launch people to and from the space station, and lots more still working on and making on the lower end space transportation something that we really don't want to have a monopoly player. So we are, at least I think most people in the US recognizing this was the right thing to do, but it sure was not easy at the time.
I bet. Well done for seeing it through. Jason, the press can sometimes present space as being a kind of plaything for billionaires, but I also read that there will be this space era is a real driver for the future economy. Tell us how, and maybe give us some tangible examples of how space development can help the world at large and humanity at large.
Yeah, sure. So, and Lori knows this much better than me about some of the missions that go on at NASA, and a lot of the barriers that existed for the various labs around the country to be able to launch spacecraft to go out and do, a lot of, for example, Earth observation missions, and this lowering of the cost of launch has been really helpful in allowing us to do that. But today we're launching, Earth observation satellites, and we all have cell phones with labs on it. And we've probably all zoomed in on the top of our house, for example, using that satellite imagery. That's come in large part as a result of this lowering of access of launch and allowing commercial providers to go out and put up sensors that do that kind of data. And with our ability to do what I just described, zooming in on the top of your house, you can also map the world. But look, in the future, we're going to be putting up sensors that'll be, monitoring what's going on with the climate. For example, we certainly have lots of weather satellites that are up there that are operated by NASA and NOAA and other government agencies. We're launching satellites here, I think, in the really near term to track methane emissions. We think everybody agrees that methane's not a great thing to be inadvertently or maybe inadvertently putting out into the atmosphere. So we're going to have all kinds of sensing capabilities to monitor the health of the Earth and human activity on Earth. So all of that is pretty good stuff from an economic perspective. And then, of course, we've got one of these large space companies that is blanketing the skies with communication satellites that will, hopefully lower the cost of the access to the world's knowledge and data. Right. At the end of the day, the world's knowledge sits in our pockets every day, and we've got now a company that is out blanketing the Earth with all kinds of data that will enable everybody on Earth to have equal access to the internet and the world's knowledge. So that's probably a pretty good thing, and who knows exactly what that will spur from an economic activity perspective. So that's another maybe tangible example to speak of. So, Earth observation to track the health of the planet, mapping, and all that is enabled. And now we've got, hopefully lower cost access to the internet for everybody on the planet.
Laurie, anything to add to that? I know you're a founder of the Earthrise Alliance, which is capturing data, as I understand it. So what other practical applications would you like to share of the benefits of this new space era?
Sure. I think Jason provided a great summary, and around those foundational activities, you can imagine the types of things that are needed and helpful to transition that information to something, or the data to information. And we founded Earthrise because we recognize there's a lot of satellite data, specifically Earth remote sensing related from satellite constellations, not just in the US, but around the world, that just really wasn't being utilized for all the benefits it could provide. A lot of this development has been paid for, as Jason said earlier, with a military focus. That tends to be the way things advance. And then you turn out, well, now we've got this capability, we've got this data. What else can we do with it? And that has proven to be something that, with the, I think, merging of the technologies of data storage, modeling, analytics, we've been able to provide maps using the data. That's what's really important. Earthrise, for instance, was able, and it's really through AI, if we in the US can see from satellites where certain assets or polluting factories exist in this country, and we know physically where they are, we can just look at the signature and the satellite data and know where they are anywhere in the world. And we have been able to go, for instance, to China with maps and show them we can see what is happening now. So this isn't really a military application as much as it is a pro-humanity application, I would say, from things. And it's not unlike most technology developments. They go through this cycle. And right now, for us, those things that can utilize the amazing data we have are, I see, some of the most exciting things. There'll of course be more sensors. You'll get higher fidelity. But AI has really allowed us to do a lot more with it.
Jason, there's been a kind of radical changing of the guard. Like most industries, there's been a huge disruption. I've been reading about partnerships between maybe some of the old guard and the bigger companies and smaller firms, and the impact on innovation. Could you comment on that and bring that to life for us?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think what has been really fascinating and interesting to watch over the last 10 or 15 years is this lowering of cost of access to space has brought forth this idea that, going back to the warfare example here. So first it was the sea, then it was the air, and now we're up in space. And it used to be the old guard, speaking of the old guard, would focus in on developing very large, what they describe as exquisite satellites, which I think from my perspective is code for really, really expensive, right? Multiple billions of dollars worth of money would get spent to develop these very large satellites. And they were large because the cost of launch was so expensive. And you wanted to jam as many sensors and as many capabilities as you could onto a spacecraft because it was going to cost a lot of money to launch it. Today, with the lowering of cost of access to space, we're able to launch smaller form factor satellites that are going to have more specialized sensors on them and that are designed to not live as long or fly as long, with an eye towards maybe upgrading these satellites over time as technology progresses. And so the Space Development Agency, I think, has been it's a bit of a renaissance in government contracting from my perspective, with these various tranches of buys that they've put out to the industrial base, starting with Tranche 0, which is like prototypes, and Tranche 1 and 2, 3, et cetera, over time. And what they're doing is opening up competitions in each one of these tranches and allowing new companies to come in and bid on work. And because the old guard was focused on these large, exquisite satellites, they didn't really know how to do these smaller form factor satellites and iterate on them very, very quickly. So what they have done is gone out and make some acquisitions, or they've partnered with some of these smaller upstart companies that have focused on building smaller form factor buses or have got specialized sensors to go onto these spacecraft. So that's this is one of those, like, I think, success stories in government contracting and kind of spurring investment and putting people on firm fixed price contracts and getting them to put, as Lori puts it, skin in the game, getting the industrial base putting skin in the game. So I think a lot of these partnerships that you're talking about have been driven by the government figuring out the right incentive structures and putting those in place and getting industry to bring forth innovation and do it in a way where they benefit from having some visibility on revenue streams because they know that there are going to be these series of buys over many years. But they've got to compete to win, and then I think that's been a pretty healthy thing overall.
Laurie, I'd love your opinion too about changes that have pleased you and encouraged you, but also, changes that haven't happened fast enough in the world of space.
Yeah, I really agree that it has been healthy in the macro sense. Of course, there are winners and losers along the way, but I always, and we tried to be at the time of making these changes, wanted to be clear. This wasn't about having existing contractors continue to be even more healthy. If anything, again, I was working for the U.S. government, so it was about making the U.S. more competitive. I think to some extent that is already working, and there are going to be on the fringes, things that need to recalibrate. Partnerships have been so fun for me to watch, knowing early on what some of these meetings were like. And I have said, boy, if I, you can think maybe I had all this in the back of my mind, but I did not. It turns out that people are really creative when things change. And while change is hard, as I said, it is also the only constant. So those generally who remain nimble, who remain really with their eyes on the horizon, are doing the most. And sometimes those have really turned out to be positive. And I have, for instance, I started a fellowship for women in aerospace and collegiate, and they are spending their summers in a paid internship in aerospace companies, and there's 50 a summer. This is only an 8-year-old fellowship, and in the beginning, I would have thought it would be hard to find 50 aerospace companies. We have a wait list of 50 companies. There are so many new ideas, not everyone in a classical, we're a launch company area of aerospace, but I think your very first point, this is a time when there is growth in many areas, and I think it's pretty unique to see big, small, medium, all trying to figure out, because the government is still a huge customer, how they can best capitalize on that and then get their private sector markets and make a go of it.
You give me a lovely introduction to my next question for Jason about future investment opportunity. As an analyst, I know we can't go into too much detail, but is there going to be an explosion of interest for private investors?
Yeah, look, I think there has been to date. And I think what the market at this point, Lori mentioned early on, these SPACs that led to quite a bit of new money coming into the space industry. Some of it's gone well, some of it hasn't thus far for investors. I think there are a few things to kind of keep in the back of our minds here as we think about the space industry, right? I think as companies and investors are assessing, how to make a go at this, I think the first thing you need to ask yourself are, who are the customers that have a mission need to be up in space, and who are the customers that have the financial wherewithal to be there over the longer term, right? So mission and financial wherewithal. And, to date, the one customer you can say very consistently have been governments, both on the military side as well as on the civil side, to be, going out and doing either exploration, Earth observation kinds of missions. But any space company that comes to the market and suggests that it's going to go out and invent something new and create demand that doesn't exist today, I think should be viewed with some level of skepticism, right? Because we know that the customer that's going to be there over the longer term, given the mission need and the financial wherewithal, are governments.
It's impossible, Laurie, in a kind of half an hour conversation to do justice to your experience at NASA. I'd love some other stories and anecdotes. Maybe Artemis, you were directly involved with Artemis. Maybe could you tell us about the importance of that, the significance of that, and some insight into the development?
Depending on how you measure it, today we say the commercial and government combined aerospace economy is nearly $500 billion, so around $450 billion. Much greater than 50% is in communications and telecom. Beyond that is GPS, positioning, weather. So these are all markets maturing. NASA sees itself and really always has, and I felt appropriately so, focused on driving to that next level thing where there aren't markets yet. And the government, that was part of my rationale for loosening our grip on the transportation element. We, as a nation, have decided to be spacefarers, and beyond our International Space Station, set the goal of returning to the moon. Now, we've set this goal a few times, and in fact, I was not involved when this happened most recently. That was during the Trump administration, and the program is called Artemis, as you mentioned. It is named after the sister of Apollo, appropriately so. I did tried to name things Artemis when I was at NASA for this reason. We have now one test flight of the initial rocket and capsule that has the ability to take us to lunar distance. While the President Trump said this would be a landing in 2024. We're in 2024. We are nowhere near landing. I'm even hearing of further delays. Maybe by 2028, 2030, the U.S. will again land people on the moon. I think there are other nations, notably China, who have said they want to go back by 2030. NASA's called this a race to the moon, which I take issue with since we won the race in the 1960s. This mission, however, the Artemis plan is, if it works, a really different setup. They're trying to go to the lunar South Pole where there could be water, where we know there's water. We might be able to mine it and turn it into fuel that could take us onto Mars. These are a lot of excitement around it. I don't think there will be commercial viable markets beyond the government in the lunar economy for a while, but NASA is sure hyping it like, oh, we took this first step with commercial transportation and now it's going to be the moon and then Mars. And really, without these billionaires, that these programs would be much, much more expensive. So we did sort of touch on, you asked a question about, is this sort of a billionaire playground? I think it's an odd mix right now, and hopefully that will work its way through to be something that's sustainable. I think that's TBD.
Great. My last question to you both, and Jason, I'm going to let you go first, is just a broad observation. Are you optimistic about where space is going to take us?
Am I optimistic about where space is going to take us? Oh, for sure. I mean, this is to be a cliche kind of thing to say, but knowledge is power. And I think that we will, by virtue of having spacecraft observing what's going on back here on Earth, we'll garner more knowledge. And with that, we'll hopefully, come lots of, good decisions about how we go forward in humanity and take care of our planet. So I'm certainly optimistic on that side of things. I hope as well from a military side of things that, intelligence will lead to fewer mistakes being made in the future, right? I think we could all think back even inside of our lifetimes, maybe within the last 20 5 years or so and say, with better intelligence, we may have made some different decisions. So I'm hopeful that with this, with the sensing payloads that we're putting up there, that we'll have more transparency about what humans are up to or going on, around the world, and with that will come, I don't want to say peace, but maybe things that resemble, more something similar to global peace, or world peace, I guess is the right phrase. And then look, from an exploration perspective, I think having these billionaires involved has been really, really helpful because they help us dream big, for sure. They wouldn't be successful if it weren't for the U.S. government. They're all, getting a lot of money from the U.S. government that are kind of subsidizing these dreams that they have. But, who knows what will come out of the knowledge that we gain from some of these exploration missions that we'll do. I don't know how much more we'll learn in going back to the moon, but going further afield. If we are successful in setting up, international space stations that, zip around different planets or start with our own moon, who knows what we'll learn, these zero gravity R&D labs that we're talking about. Maybe it'll help cure cancer. I don't know. But I think going out and just garnering more knowledge, I'm hopeful it's going to be helpful to all of us back here on Earth. And certainly, I guess, adjusted the transparency side and having everybody kind of know what's going on back here with human activity and what's going on with our climate is got to be a good thing.
Last word from you, Laurie. Same question. Are you an optimist?
Indeed, I am. I don't think you find many people in the aerospace world who are not optimists generally, because you have to believe in things before you create them in our business. But for a lot of the same reasons as Jason said, it's positive. Now, we all know there are technologies that have positive and can also have negative implications, but for the most part, this really is a future that I venture to say it's inevitable. We say at NASA that why don't dinosaurs exist anymore? Well, they didn't have a space program. So we like to believe that we have advanced to a point where we can help society through our space program. And if that is detecting and deterring an asteroid down the road, absolutely, you bet. Everyone's going to be happy we had a space program. But I think we also have these more earthly needs, like how to understand what's happening on our planet, how to live together more peacefully. And space has just offered, we live just at a unique time where we have the capability to address some of these challenges of our own making. So why wouldn't, of course, I'm hopeful. I think I'm most hopeful that space can contribute to this in ways exceeding what it has done before. And what it has done before is truly amazing. We can have instantaneous knowledge, communications, because of our space program. People don't think about it every day, but we all benefit from it every day.
What a beautiful way to finish. Thank you so much. You've totally broadened my mind to the world of space. You're going to leave me with the thought of why didn't dinosaurs have a space program? I'm going to ruminate on that. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Pleasure to be with you.
On the next episode of Good Things Happen, we'll be discussing how technology is enabling better health. I'll be joined by Dr. Harshit Jain, founder and global CEO of DoCare, an innovative healthcare marketing platform that connects healthcare professionals with life science brands, and Citi's global head of healthcare, Naman Ansari. See you there.
Citigroup Inc., Citi and Laurie Garver are not affiliated and are independent companies. The speakers' views are their own and may not necessarily reflect the views of Citi or any of its affiliates. Neither the information provided nor any opinion expressed constitutes a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. The expressions of opinion are not intended to be a forecast of future events or a guarantee of future results.